This video is meant to serve as a update to Brewmaster Monk going into, I guess we're like middle of the week of week 2 of the season. And I just want to kind of talk about some like frequently asked questions that I've been getting and just kind of give my overall thoughts on Brewmaster thus far in the season. I'm going to be looking at Murloc.io and the leaderboards on Raider.io as well. And I'll talk a little bit about Raid, but I'm not like someone who likes to raid too much, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. But I guess the elephant in the room is a lot of people are asking, why are people still playing Shado-Pan? And this is a really good question. There's definitely a lot of content creators, including myself, kind of really pushed and advertised that Master of Harmony is going to be the play when you get your new 4-set. But what players are starting to notice as Brewmaster players, especially at the higher end, start getting their 4-set, they're sticking with Shado-Pan. So I want to answer that question here and kind of talk about it and give my thoughts. And then I also want to talk about just some other things in terms of like talents and how Brewmaster is performing so far in the season. So let's take a look at Murloc.io really quick. Just in case you don't know the site, it's really good. It aggregates data from like Battle.net API, and it basically will give you a list of the top 50 players, and you can look at pretty much any class and spec. You can also, it originally was a PvP site, but that doesn't matter. You can see the top players, and this updates every about 12 hours or so, and then you can look at like their individual builds. So if we come here to the front page, you can like click on me, for example, and you'll be able to see what my stat weights look like, the talent build I was most recently playing based on obviously Blizzard's API, and you can see the gear. And then if you go back, you can see it compiles that data, and you can see basically like a heat map of all of the talents that are being played, and you can like see hero talents, for example. So this is really what I want to focus on here. So in the top 50, you're seeing that 42 are still playing Shado-Pan, while only 8 are playing Aspect of Harmony, with Equinox being really the only one in the top 5 that's really representing it. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. First off, at the end of last week, I haven't really looked this week, he was not even playing 4-set, but a lot of the top monks didn't even have their 4-sets yet. So that's why you saw a big kind of people staying on Shado-Pan. It offers better damage, better synergy with our older tier set. It's better single target generally all around, and it offers a amazing predictive training 10% DR. And the only time this would ever really drop was on boss fights, but whenever you were in trash pulls, this was up 100% of the time. You're always having a flat 10% DR, which is super, super nice. Now, the reason that Master of Harmony isn't being super popularized right now is because, and this is just what I think, is that we don't have item level for stagger effectiveness, and we don't have the secondary stat optimization that you would normally have at the end of a patch. On PTR, this was performing very well, where Shado-Pan, while it was doing a little bit more single target, Master of Harmony was very competitive in Mythic Plus. But as of right now, it seems to be the other way around. And the reason for that is mostly because as people gear, you're going to find that you're going to sacrifice your optimized secondary stats for higher item level, because that just makes sense. But as you do that and you lose out on your critical strike and versatility, and you might go more into haste and mastery just because it's higher item level, Shado-Pan just becomes a little bit more stable because you have a 10% TR, where Master of Harmony feels to me a little bit more dependent on stat weights. And I'm not talking for damage, I'm talking purely from like a survivability and gameplay standpoint. I've done a handful of keys, like 12 keys as Master of Harmony, and I have been kind of miserable. Now, I haven't done it in the last couple days with my new stat distribution because I did rework a lot of my gear. But last week, I was sitting around almost 40% critical strike, and I was only at 10% verse, which meant that my pull openings were rough. Because despite me dodging things, I wasn't benefiting from predictive training like you do in the Shado-Pan tree. Because when you swap to Master of Harmony, you lose out on that. Now, last week, I was playing a 2-2 set. 2 old, 2 new, which felt good, but it only really gave me free fortifying brews. Now, you can make an argument that this is really good with Mantra of Tenacity. This is roughly a 10 to 15% overall healing and a key depending on proc rates. This can be very good, but unlike predictive training, it's not a 10% DR, it's a flat absorb, and that absorb, as you get into higher keys, gets eaten up quicker. Now, of course, Mantra of Purity generally tends to be the better play, but Mantra of Purity is very bad in low keys, where Tenacity would be better. Because Tenacity, a 2.9 or 3 million absorb shield, to keep the number simple, is going to be way more effective in your +4 than it is going to be in your +13. With Mantra of Purity, you need high stagger, which means you need high main stat. You want, obviously, high versatility, And you need to play a certain talent build to make Mantra of Purity work, because what it's doing is it's making, instead of Purifying Brew 10%, it's now six, or not 10%, sorry, I'm like reading the tooltip, 50%, it's now 60. You do gain a small absorb that absorbs incoming stagger, but it requires you to play more into things like Anvil and Stave, High Tolerance. You could play Ox Dance and stuff, but essentially you're really having to play more defensively when you're playing Master of Harmony. And while you can gain a little bit more AoE damage, this is just not scaling well because Mantra of Tenacity is bad in high keys right now, and Mantra of Purity basically isn't good with bad stats, is kind of what I'm trying to like make the argument for. So that's why you're probably not seeing a lot of people play Master of Harmony, is because of stat distribution. I would recommend you're at least at 30% crit, and you probably want 20+% versatility. So if you don't find yourself at those stats, you definitely want to probably stick to Shado-Pan. While it is a boring playstyle, and I think most players were looking forward to a kind of change of pace, Shado-Pan is probably still the play for the next upcoming weeks. Now, of course, Master of Harmony is doable, as you can see here. Oops, and if it decides to like be all buggy, if we actually come over to Raider.io, I'm looking at myself really quick, but let's go to Equinox really quick and like kind of just like break down what he's been running. So he is running 4-piece, he is running Master of Harmony, he is running that Mantra of Purity, which makes sense in higher keys, and his talent build is actually really interesting because he's deciding not to play Capstones. And the reason for that is, I mean, there's a couple things that are going on here, but Anvil and Save becomes a lot more powerful when you're playing Mantra, because having more Purifying Brew means you get more absorbs for Mantra of Purity, and you're going to be able to purify more stagger more often, which also leads into more Guy Plin's Imperial Brew healing, which again is all good. Healing and stagger purification effectiveness is strong, but Shado-Pan is going to be more stable for the average player. If you also notice, he's not playing any of the capstones, which is really interesting, and the big reason for this is because he is actually playing the 2-minute CD Signet. Shado-Pan is giving you cooldown reduction. Chi Surge also gives you cooldown reduction on Weapons of Order, turning it from like a 2-minute down to like a 130 or even less than that, if you're depending on like how optimally you're playing, especially if you like bring into like different factors like Lust. But when you're playing Signet the Priori, you just pair this with Weapons of Order, making his Weapons Order really, really strong. So you have to kind of change your mentality when you're playing Master of Harmony, where Shado-Pan, you don't really have to. You're just going to naturally do less damage because you're not playing the optimal talents for Shado-Pan. So like I said, it's doable. He is doing world first keys. He's almost 3K. I'm sure he's going to push up a lot higher than this in the very near future. But as of right now, like Master of Harmony, again, is playable. It's just a lot of players are still sticking with Shado-Pan. I don't know if he got 4-set last week. I know that I got 4-set this week. But not every player has 4-set. I guess Butter got it. I'm gonna just kind of like look through here kind of quickly. Yeah, we have some 2-2s. I would imagine that most players are probably gonna be sticking to 2-2. We got 4-set on Raya. Actually, let's look at the EU region really quick. I'm just kind of curious because I know that Monksy has blasted past 3K as well. There's a CN Monk that's also almost there, which is pretty tight. So he's playing 4-set. So it looks like players are starting to kind of gather their 4-set. But as you can see, most people are still playing Shado-Pan. So I hope that kind of answers the question. Shado-Pan just seems to be a little bit more optimal right now because of while we're still gearing. I think Master of Harmony might become more optimal later down the road when we're closer to that 678 benchmark. But right now, I would consider myself fairly geared. I'm actually almost out of Runecrest. The last piece that I need to get out of Runecrest is just my boots. It's the last piece, and I actually already have boots that I can level up, but I'm out of Runecrest, so I have to wait until next week before I can get out of that area. But yeah, it's once we get another 10 to 15 item levels, we'll be looking a lot better. Overall, let's talk about the dungeons just really briefly. I think Brewmaster is kind of doing pretty good in some of these dungeons, but I think it depends on the comp you're playing with. When I'm playing with casters, I feel like to optimize caster pulls, you have to be able to pull bigger, and Brewmaster kind of struggles at bigger pulls sometimes. But I've been playing, and if you tuned into my stream at all, or you've been looking at, if you happen to glance at my IO page, you would see that I'm mostly playing with like physical cops. I'm playing with like BM Hunter, mostly warriors and outlaw rogues. And then I'm playing, I've been pushing with an R Shaman, which is what I prefer, and that's what gives us lust. But lately I've been playing a lot with like Mistweaver monks as well as Resto Druids, basically just full purebred damage compositions for physical, which has made these keys extremely effective because when you're playing with those types of classes, you have just like low target count classes, but they do a lot of damage and they do a lot of physical damage. So me being there as a monk bolsters their damage by 5%, and it makes these pulls go by pretty quickly. Oh, one last thing I forgot to mention. I meant to talk about this in the video, so I'm going to splice it in wherever, maybe randomly. It'll be funny. Embellishments, or not embellishments, but crafting. I get a lot of questions about crafting. I personally made the belt. Now, a lot of guides I maybe might have told people to make weapons. I don't think that was the right play. And the reason why is because in an optimal scenario, later down the road, like later in the season, most likely you're going to want to have max item level weapons. You may dual wield, you may craft like a polearm, but you're probably going to want the highest item level possible. And if you're doing that, you probably don't craft. So if you crafted a weapon, it's not a big deal. It's actually not bad at all, but you're probably going to replace it in a couple of weeks, give or take like 6 weeks or so. And I think most people will generally default back to Adrenaline Surge with the Nerubian embellishment to double its effectiveness, which is what like I personally am currently playing. I think Weapon might have been a better play for like pure single target raid progression, but Adrenaline Surge Clasp is just going to be kind of your long-term item. And on top of that, if you happen to have a bad vault, it happens, you can comfortably take sockets knowing that you can socket this item and it be like a solid choice. Now, of course, socket is like such a minor gain, but if you do have a bad one, you always have like this as a backup default to like throw a socket in when you have a bad vault week in the near future. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about crafting really quick. Again, weapon would have been fine for like pure single target sims, but you might replace it in the future. And under that context, you probably go belt because you'll probably never replace this. It's high crit with a little bit less verse, and then it gives you a massive amount of mastery and whenever you take damage, which has like roughly a 30% uptime in keys. So anyways, I hope that makes sense for crafting. Yeah. Anyways, that's like a quick update. I think the dungeon pool has generally been pretty good this season. I think the hardest key has to be Priory of the Sacred Flame. I just think it's an extremely tight, very punishing timer. If you happen to wipe, the graveyard is all the way at the beginning of the dungeon. There's a lot of patrol mobs. The mobs are dangerous. There's a lot of casters, lots of sharpshooters, and there's a lot of like lethal burst damage when it overlaps with like if a missed kick, for example. I think some of the easier keys, at least for Brewmaster this season, has been like things like Dark Flame Cleft has been quite a treat. You also have dungeons like Floodgate, which honestly Floodgate also feels pretty tame for a Brewmaster monk, and so does Theater of Pain. So those are probably my 3 favorite keys this season. I don't really know what else to talk about in this video. I think the season's going pretty well so far. The dungeon pool I think is much better than it has been in the past. And that's kind of the big kind of elephant in the room question about Shado-Pan versus Master of Harmony. So if you have any questions, leave them down below. I'm going to do my best to answer them, but my plan is to maybe do like a Q&A video. So if you have a question about something, and if it's popular enough, I'll try to answer it in like, I'll do another update video towards the end of this week where I talk about maybe some of your guys' questions. So please let me know. And if there's a question down there that you want the answer to, like hit like, so I know what the priority might look like there. So anyways, I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. Good luck in your keys. And of course, if you want to catch me live on stream or join my Discord, you can do those down below. Anyways, a massive shout out to all my Patreon supporters who allow me to do what I do. Without them, I couldn't do stuff like this. So anyways, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.